Now that the wooden deck is on, I can begin the installation of the first level of the superstructure. The walls for the main deck come in 2 layers, and these are all focused around the center of the main deck. There's an exterior layer and then an interior layer. The interior layer has multiple doors and ladders, but some of these are going to be obscured when the external cladding is installed. For example, the doors of the forward section and these doors. Now, it doesn't make sense to remove these plastic doors and replace them with photo etch if they're going to be concealed and never seen. So what I need to do is cut off all of these pieces, place them on the deck with the shelter deck installed above it, and see which of these details are actually visible. Once I know which details will be visible when the model is constructed, I can then replace them with photo etch, and I'll leave the details that will be concealed in plastic. Construction of this section of superstructure is going to be spread over multiple videos. In this video, I'll be focusing on planning. So I'll be removing all these parts from the sprue and cleaning them up. I'll then place them on the ship to get an idea of where they will sit and how they'll interact with each other. Based on how that proceeds, I'll then plan which details need to be replaced with photo etch and how I'll go about applying them to the ship and painting them. All of the plastic components that I'll be working with can be found on the C sprue. These parts aren't very detailed, but I do have a lot of photo etch that I can use to upgrade the detail. I have replacement hatches, gratings, doors, and ladders. It's just a matter of determining which of these I need to replace. So let's get on to doing that. The first thing to do is to cut these parts off of their sprue. When cutting the parts off the sprue, I always leave a small piece of plastic between where I'm cutting and the part. That's just so that when I do make the cut, it doesn't gouge any plastic out of the part. On this sprue, almost everything will be removed. There are only 2 small parts that are going to be left on this sprue. As I cut them off, I refer to the manual just to make sure that I am cutting off the correct pieces and that nothing is left behind. After all the parts have been removed, I then further cut down this excess plastic. Now that I'm able to cut them at a better angle, I'm able to trim it closer to the part without causing any damage. Following which, I use a file to sand the edge to be smooth. As you would expect, preparing simple parts like this is not complex. I'm also going to begin preparing the shelter deck. The first thing I'm going to do is remove these plastic moldings that hold the boats. I use clippers to cut them as close to the deck as possible, and then use a file to scrape off the remaining raised section. In this process, I do gouge the deck quite badly, but that is not a problem since this is a flat and low detail area. The area where there are details that you would normally want to preserve is in the wooden deck area, but that is going to be covered over by a wooden deck veneer, so I care about that even less. It just needs to be flat over there so that the wooden deck can sit level. In the area of the deck where it's going to be painted, there are no details. The surface is completely smooth, so any scratches that I place on the surface can be fixed with plastic putty. So that is the next step. I thin Tamiya plastic putty with Tamiya lacquer thinners and then apply it to the model with a brush. After giving it a few hours to dry, I then smooth it off with sandpaper. There are a few more modifications that need to be made to this deck, but I'm not going to do them at this stage. Now that I've prepared all the pieces, I can do a test fit. I'm looking to see if there's any overlap between the wooden deck and these parts that I need to install. For the parts that go in the center, if there is overlap, it's not that important because the shelter deck is going to sit above here, so I can just make sure that everything's the same height by sanding. As long as they reasonably well fit in place, it'll be fine. Okay, so now what I want to do is try and determine which joints are going to be visible. The shelter deck sits like that, so everything in this area is going to be concealed. There are no windows or anything into that area, so this part in its entirety and these joints are not going to be visible at all. So I'm going to mark this one with an eye for invisible. That joint will be invisible, and that ladder will be invisible, because this comes all the way to here. We won't be able to see even down to there. All of this from there to there will be invisible. These will probably be invisible, but might be visible. So I'm going to mark this as invisible. Actually, let me just draw a line across all the invisible bits. The same logic can then be applied to the other side. That will be visible, but all of this will be invisible. These pieces are going to be out and exposed to the front, so those aren't really an issue, but they are going to have to be blended in quite nicely at some point. Up to here, that will be a clear joint line, and I'll be able to see down that. So this part is going to be visible, and both of those joints will be visible as well. Same as with this piece, it's going to be visible. And then this joint line there and there will be visible. On these little structures, that joint will be invisible, but this door won't be. This entire panel will be invisible, and that joint won't be visible. So that's quite convenient. I don't have to worry about that. But this panel, invisible in its entirety, as will be this panel. This panel, the hatch will be visible, but the joint will be invisible. So I'm just going to mark the joint. Same with this one. The joint will be invisible. Over here, we'll be able to see this face through that opening, but this will butt up right against the edge, meaning that joint will be concealed. You won't be able to see that. So this is also all fine. Same will apply on this side. This area is a bit interesting because this area is totally sectioned off. In fact, I bet that when this is all closed up, it'll be too dark in there. Even just putting my hand over it, it's going to be too dark to see this piece of decking. So that's actually pretty pointless. In fact, I don't think there's even an edge provided over there. That's right, there isn't. As you can see, it remains completely open. They don't even close it off, so you can see down into this area. That's not intended to be a visible area of the ship at all, which means that piece of decking is actually not required. So the next question is, what on the deck needs to be removed? Well, obviously these little strips here need to be removed because I need to stick these pieces of cladding down over there. So I'm going to pull that off on both sides. There we go. You can see over here there's a little bit of overlap of this in that area, and as I say, it is completely closed off. So this decking veneer doesn't need to be here. So I'm going to pull it off. That's going to make it considerably easier to stick these panels in place. There's a little bit of overlap on this edge, and I bet I can just push that up like that. Yes, that fits in very nicely. This bit in the middle, once again, if it floats up a little bit, it's okay. That fits in quite nicely. It's not getting impacted by the deck along these edges. I can see that all fits in well. This fits in here, and it's in solid contact with plastic the entire length. As for this side, solid contact with plastic across the entire length. I'm happy with that as well. These don't matter because they're going to go underneath, so as long as they're just stuck down properly and sanded flat, it's not a problem. Which leaves these central pieces, and there I can see this is going to be a problem here. This piece of deck that's overlapping the edge here, that's going to get in the way because I'm going to want to bond the base of this railing to the hull. So I need to cut that off. Fortunately, it is going to be concealed, so I don't have to worry about this edge being perfect, but it does need to go. Now that I know where the visible details and joints will be, I can plan how I'm going to do the installation. First thing I'm going to do is remove the molded details for these visible parts and replace them with photo etch. Then for these interior parts, they'll be sprayed in the correct color, and I will then glue them down. After gluing them down, I need to fix these 4 join lines and then respray that area. Once that is done, I can then move on to the exterior walls. Those can also be painted and glued in place. For the most part, they are freestanding, so that's not going to be an issue. In the aft area, these joint lines are not going to be visible, and these details will not be visible, so I don't need to worry about that. I will need to give some attention to the joint in this area, but that will be easy to touch up as well. In this area, there's a lot of photo etch that needs to be installed, replacing these molded details. What I'll do is I'll sand off the details first, and I'll install the details on the lower sections, like the door and the grating. For the hatches, the upper area, those I'll leave off until I've blended in this line and filled it, and then I will install that photo etch and spray the entire area. In any case, all of that will be for the next video. If you would like to support this channel or see how this model looks when it is completed, then please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Cheers.